The word supplementation itself means that you supplement something, right? And why do you supplement? It is because there is a lack of certain ingredients, or there is a gap somewhere in your diet, and keep yourselves engaged. And what better way to keep yourself engaged than fitness or any kind of activity?
Welcome, Vijay, to finish your talk. It's great to have you on board. Viewers here, mainly a lot of our runners and participants from our events. Vijayaraghavan Venugopal, CEO and founder of Fast&Up with us. And he's a sub 3 hour marathoner, has been running since 2012, runs a supplement company, knows a thing or two about supplements. What better person to have with us to tell us a little bit about supplements, how to use them, and what to do with them. Thanks, Vijay, for joining us this morning. Why don't you give us, in your own words, who you are, how did you get to where you are right now, your running journey, and how's it been with Fast&Up, and how are the current circumstances of pandemic and everything that's going on treating you? How's life with you right now?
So thanks, Andy, first of all, for the opportunity. It's been amazing to see how you guys have evolved, and pleasure to be here. You have actually asked a lot of questions into one, so I'll try to kind of summarize it pretty quickly. Just to let you know, sports has always been something which is very dear to me right from childhood. So obviously, 25 years back, you never had the opportunity to kind of merge a lot of your hobbies, passion, and profession at that point of time. You
Right.
typically do whatever was destined to be, right? And went into a corporate role, etc. But always kept touch with sports, and sports is something which I have always been close to. It was probably in the decade of 2010 to 2020, which where I got the opportunity to start running again while I was in Pune. Just that running gives you an opportunity to have some measurable goals,
Right.
unlike playing a sport like a badminton or a cricket, or once you leave the competitive side, there are very few sports which gives you a measurable kind of proposition, and running gave something like that. And running was also getting popular, and so I just went into running and started as any other runner would do, go through the rungs, kept improving, and slowly felt that I got a lot of what I wanted in running. And so that evolved. And I think parallelly what happened was I was actually out of corporate work in a very structured way in 2013 or so. So there was an opportunity for me and a few of us to start off on another journey, which is into nutrition through Fast&Up. And so that journey started in 2015. The great thing about this journey is that it was a very nice aggregation of nutrition or healthcare, where I actually spent a lot of my professional life, my hobbies of passion, which is sports, and also an opportunity to be a semi-entrepreneur, I would say. So it all culminated into a Fast&Up journey, and it was also the time when it was taking up. Uh, so 5 years back, Fast&Up was still relatively new. Nutrition is a very tricky field, in the sense that people do not know much about it. And 5 years back, the scene was even worse, right? Any which ways, we went through that process, the path, and one of the communities that we were closely interacting with was the running community, and it still continues to be. But I think this year has been a watershed year for many in multiple ways. And for the nutrition industry, it has been a very a landmark year, I would say, which has actually expedited the journey of any nutrition company by at least 3 years, because a lot of focus has come into nutrition from the general public as well, for whatever reason, because of COVID, because of fear. But my own hunch is that this is going to stay in terms of being more proactive to nutrition rather than being reactive to, in which in a sense is good for companies like Fast&Up. and we would continue our journey into sports and into fitness, etc. But it also helps us to broad base our journey into more of the general segments. So in that way, I think this year has been helpful, and luckily for us, we have been in the right place. But obviously, we have had challenges, like, I mean, as COVID would have, across the people, the employee community, the customers, the certain segments which have not been up to the mark, etc. But then I think we will eventually come over it, right? And you see opportunities and grow over. So that's been in a nutshell things.
That's fantastic. And I think a couple of very important points you made out there, uh, like how running is a sport which gives you measurable goals as opposed to any other sport. Once you get out of the competitive landscape, it's very difficult for you to, I guess, track progress on a, say, a badminton game, right? Whereas running, it's very clear. There's distance, there's time, and it's a very simple kind of a metric that you need to track. And the second point that you made, the second point, standout point that I thought was about how there is a greater awareness of nutrition being an important part of health, wellness, and fitness per se. And it's become much more broad based, like you said, right? It's not just the sportsmen who are looking at nutrition. It's also others. It's also amateurs. It's also the a lot like our typical audience. People who want to be fit, right, and who want to kind of get into this. And I think nutrition has become very important. That gives me an interesting segue, right? What is it about nutrition as we practice it today that actually requires supplements? Why don't we get all the nutrition that we need from our existing food? Why do we need supplements? Clearly, you have identified that as a niche. You have been very successful in building Fast&Up, and it has grown leaps and bounds. And like you said, probably this year it's really kind of grown to another level as well. Why do you see that this need exists? Just from a basic biology level, what's making it so useful and important?
So, Sani, that's a very interesting question, because people obviously want to know why supplementation, right? I think I would again would like to say that in a utopian world, if we had all the time in the world and had access to all the right ingredients in the food that we take, then possibly you don't need supplementation. The word supplementation itself means that you supplement something, right? And why do you supplement? It is because there is a lack of certain ingredients, or there is a gap somewhere in your diet. Now, I mean, it's even right from childhood, for example, right? You have a gap in a certain vitamin. You go to a doctor, they tell you, please eat more of the right kind of vegetables or right kind of food. But unfortunately, the kid doesn't eat it. And so you supplement, right? So fundamentally, I think people have to be aware that there's nothing right or wrong in it. I mean, we are all saying the same thing, right, in terms of supplementation. If you're not able to access real food every time, then you supplement. Now, if you kind of take it to the community that we are in, more of the running and more of the sports community, uh, there are two kinds of people, right? The elites as well as the amateurs. When you talk about elites, why do they need supplementation? The amount of workload that they take, if they have to get the fuel for that every day, they will have to almost eat for 5-6 hours a day to get that intake into the body and to make the body fresh again for the workout that they do time and again. And hence you need to have a quick form of intakes, due to which they supplement, right? When we talk about amateurs, like people like you and me who are into running as a hobby, or some other sport, we are into multiple activities, like, right? I mean, we travel quite a bit. We take a morning flight, go to another city. We often skip breakfast, or even if we have breakfast, it is not a wholesome meal that we take. The lunches are delayed. The quantities are mixed up. So there are definitely going to be gaps, right? Now it's your choice whether to let the gaps remain and wait and try to see if you can find real food which can fill up the gap, or go and supplement. Now the danger comes when you kind of go towards supplements and say that only supplements will help you and you don't need any real food, right? That's where the danger comes in. And then you have all the reasons for quick fixes and doing certain things just to ensure that you reach a certain point and exceed. That's where there is a lot of dichotomy there, and people are little averse to having supplements. But if you have it in the right balanced way, I think it's a wonderful thing.
That's great. So how does one go about it? I don't take supplements at all. If I want to start and I want to start taking supplements, how do I know which supplements to take? I mean, how do I know where to start? What's the most basic supplement that you think, us as Indians, given our diet profile, what do you think is the most basic thing that we should be taking? How do we build up from there? How do we build up as like you said, sportsmen and as non-sportsmen as well?
So there are different ways to do it, but if I have to just give you a few examples, right? I think hydration or water, right, is one such very, very basic element that everyone has to practice. If you ask me whether it is a kind of a supplementation, yes, water taken from outside is a supplementation that you are taking, right? And right from childhood, you are told to drink as much water as possible. And a lot of us, including me, don't take the daily requirement of water, right? Now, from a very basic level, when you exercise, you also lose certain salts and certain electrolytes, right? Now you have to find a way to replenish them, right? And that is why you have the need for electrolytes, right? And that is why you probably would look at a nimbu pani, or maybe a coconut water, or or maybe a sports drink or something else, right? The forms can be many. Now there are certain basic things which I think is more of hygiene factor. You don't need to really test or go to a doctor or a nutritionist to start imbibing that habit or culture, right? Where I would say having a electrolyte or something similar to an electrolyte plus water is something basic. You don't need to really get tested,
right,
and then find out the need to have it or not, right? Eating good food which contains good proteins, good minerals, etc., is something which is a given. You don't need to go to a nutritionist or a doctor to kind of get that supplementation in. So if you look at the supplement world itself, a lot of things are actually derived from real food. For example, if I have to talk about a thing like proteins, for example, right? Nobody disputes the fact that proteins are needed. And as Indians, a lot of us are vegetarians, so we would definitely have a gap or lack of proteins, right? And that's the reason why from childhood your parents would have told you to eat certain things to build up on your protein. Now where the conflict comes is when you talk about some form of supplementation to ride over that protein shortage. Nobody is denying that you need proteins or not, right? uh, so that is where you have to make a logical choice, right? Typically, if it is very small, bare minimum kind of thing, I think it's fine. But if you're going into a regime for a month or so very repetitively, then you need professional advice possibly, right? Because you want to have a learned decision making process, right? And that's when you reach out to a nutritionist or maybe a doctor at some point in time for minerals, etc. You do some tests where you find a gap. So if you do go for an annual health checkup, typically most of the Indians, 90-95% of the Indians are short on vitamin D, including runners.
Right.
So what they typically would do is they would put you on a quick ingestion of vitamin D supplementation, right? And then you tide over it, and you are hoping that the levels are back to within normalcy. And then maybe you check it out after 1 year.
Right.
So the other process is a lot of people follow is that, okay, yeah, once you have done it, can I keep supplementing a little bit every now and then, right? In very measurable lots, right? The issue comes when you overdo things. For example, even protein, there is a thumb rule. Again, it's publicized globally that typically your protein consumption should be at least 1 gram per kg of uh, your body weight. So if you are 60 kgs, you typically would like to have a 60-gram protein consumption per day. This is a thumb rule, right? Even a nutritionist or anyone would give you the same thumb rule, right? That protein content will come from the dal you eat, from if you're a non-vegetarian, from the food you eat or whatever. Now, still there will be a gap of 30-40 grams typically, and that is what you're trying to ride over.
Right.
Now, a lot of people go on to a high protein diet, or supplement. Instead of 60 grams, they will go into 120 grams, 200 grams. That becomes a little dangerous. And I think ideally, if you have access to a nutritionist, access to some learned people who are able to make these logical decisions, do it. And always test at regular intervals gives you a very measurable quantity, right? So that's the way you should go about it.
So you used a word, interesting word. You said when they go from 60 to 120, it becomes dangerous. What is the danger? Is there a danger in over supplementation? What is the sign you look for? How do you know you're over supplementing, or is there a sign at all to know that you're over supplementing?
So a lot of times this doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
Right. So that's the danger of such
So
things.
you won't even know that
you will not even know. So
right.
I think the moment you go for over dosage of supplements, right? Like for example, if you keep eating French fries, right? If you keep drinking alcohol, right?
Yeah.
If you keep having ice cream every day,
Right.
right? It's the same with even any supplements, right?
Sure.
But the good thing about supplements is a lot of times supplements are not drugs, right? See, if you look at something like omega-3, for example, omega-3 is something which is readily available in food. It is just that you are accessing it through a format which is through supplementation. Unlike, in a pharmaceutical world, you have, for cholesterol reduction, you have the statins, atorvastatin, simvastatin, those are drugs.
Right.
So these are elements which are going into the body. So if it's protein, what is the danger? Protein, the danger is the proteins may not break down, so it has an impact on the kidney if it is taken in much higher dose, etc. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of us, including me, don't have enough proteins every day. Right. So I think finally the call comes on to the person. And just to go back to the thought that you asked about, any kind of prolonged usage of any of the products, including supplements or anything else, even coffee or tea or alcohol, you will start having some learnings in the body. The body changes a little bit, and that is when you go to the nutritionist, they will probably sometimes tell you detox the body for a week or two. Just don't do anything. Don't take anything. Just detox the body, and then they will probably again put you back to something in a very step-by-step manner.
Right.
So I think a lot of responsibility will be on the individual itself.
So again, in terms of if I heard you right, as Indians, I think what you're saying is two key supplements. One would be vitamin D in some form. I think that's a deficiency that we as Indians kind of constantly lack. And the other is probably the protein part of it, because I think we have a pretty rich, carbohydrate-rich kind of a diet. It's more, rice and wheat and more grain-based diet. So I guess protein is something that we constantly lack. Right? How does all this apply to sport? How do you, if you're an amateur sportsman, how do we bring in nutrition here? How do we bring in supplementation here as an amateur athlete?
Again, I think it's the same for elites also. It's nothing
Right.
different for amateurs, because I think if you look at the way amateur sport is developing in India,
Right.
we are actually getting more knowledgeable, trying to unlock a lot of limitations that we have, and nutrition is certainly one of them, which has evolved in the last 5 years or so, and people have access to so many things today, right? Uh, so there are different parameters which makes you get better, feel better, etc. So one of those things could be, as a runner, it could be the shoe, right? So people have now moved away from normal shoes to carbon plated shoes and whatnot, right? From a watch perspective, you have great watches right now which can actually help you measure, etc. People have started using power meters to from a heart rate monitor. They are now moving to a power meter to measure how good they are, etc. The number of visits to the physio has increased. A lot of people do a deep tissue massage, releasing the knots, etc., much more frequently these days. So if you look at everything, these are all, you're trying to improve your body and trying to get better, and also make it sustain longer, right? And nutrition is something which is equally important, if not much more. And unfortunately, I think when it comes to nutrition, a lot of us don't do enough justice to it. A lot of us, we haven't really played active sport till recently, maybe 5-10 years back. You hit the age of 35, 30, 35, then you get back and you start working out as if almost close to an elite athlete,
Right.
right?
Right.
Along with so much of work pressure, so much of travel, etc. And that's where I think everyone needs to look at their nutrition. You cannot have two different standards, right? On one hand, you want to go to a carbon plated shoe, right? But when it comes to nutrition, you say that I'm okay, whatever I'm taking, the same dosa or idli, and then you have go on to a lunch and a dinner. That works well for me. So first, the realization is that has to come that nutrition is going to play a major role, right? Uh, I think a lot of people like us have realized that. That's a good point, right? And the roads can be many things, right? I mean, you can have multiple roads to the same goal. But I think what I would request, or what I think people should, first of all, have an open mind to nutrition,
Right.
right? And this is across the spectrum. I think even elite athletes, even if you look at cricketers, if you look at any sports, they've all said nobody says no to nutrition. And when I say nutrition, it is not the food that you take. Food is given. So you make changes to the food habits, right? Which could be, I mean, as simple as somebody may say that I would want to have only 2 cheat meals a day in a week or whatever. I might want to cut down on my maybe alcohol, for example, or I might want to cut down on certain things. So these are all structural changes that you do to your uh, eating habits, and then you see where are the gaps, and then can I get one better. And that is where you have a world of vitamins, minerals, etc., coming into play. Then you have things like the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fat coming into play.
Right.
And that's how it works, right? So if you are into active sport, I mean 2-3 days in a week, etc., you have to give back to your body uh, more than what you normally would do, and that is where you need to keep an open mind and start looking at avenues to do that.
I was looking at your website and looking at the range of products, right? You have a very clear sort of a sequence. There's a pre-workout, there's a during workout, and then there's a post-workout, right? Um, how does one go about structuring this? I mean, again, I asked simply as a amateur who has not done supplementation, right? Beyond the basic, whey protein or something like that. How do I go about structuring this? How do I know? Even when I look at your product range, right? In each category, there's many things, right? Is there a Do I go to a dietitian to figure that out? Are there some basic thoughts that you can share? I mean, are there some things that you can recommend right now, saying, for pre-workout, this is what you need, during workout, this is what you need, and post-workout, this is what you need? What would you advise somebody who's just wants to know how to start with this?
Sure. So I think I will relate it to my own running journey that precedes even the birth of Fast and Up, which happened in 2015. So I from 2012.
Right.
So typically, and it was very easy for everyone to look at a pre-workout kind of pre-training kind of thing during and post. So before the run, typically I have anxieties, right? I mean, I used to have 8 years back.
Right.
You get up in the morning, I need to have a good run out there, kind of thing. So typically, you need to be prepared for that. So the pre-workout or pre-run habits basically is going to prepare you for the actual training. So whatever constitutes that is what is pre-workout. Now let us look at the elements in it, right? Uh, One is you would love to have an electrolyte balance or have enough water. So that's why people would advise you have water uh, uh, before the day and before the run also, so that you keep yourself hydrated, right? A lot of people would want to make sure that your salt balance in the body is kept well. So you have a little bit of an electrolyte even prior to your run, and that's a thing that continues across
Right.
pre, during, post, because that's a no-brainer for most of the
That's
people.
sort of a base for the
Base thing,
activity.
right?
Yeah.
And then I realized that okay, I'm going to do a run which I would need a little bit of carbohydrate. So that's why you have a small, bread or peanut butter and bread, or something to eat, a banana or something like that, right? Uh, then you also start thinking that I want to really a little bit pep up my body to do it well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where slightly different kind of ingredients come into play, right? Because certain ingredients play on your body in a slightly different way to make it more sharper, right? So it could be a beetroot juice, um, or we have one of our products which is activate, which has arginine in it. Arginine actually peps up your body because it helps the blood flow better, and so it gets the body flowing, right? And a lot of people have coffee,
Mm.
right, to they make the body more alert and focused, etc., right? uh, so those are the principles that typically people follow pre-workout, right?
Right.
And during the workout itself, you continue to hydrate, you continue to have electrolytes, because you don't want that to deplete. And then typically you want bursts of energy,
Right.
right?
Right.
And energy, if you watch the TV, people, I mean, some of the tennis guys would have a banana or have energy gels in between, and that's what the runners also do, right?
Mm.
An energy gel basically powers extra energy into your body,
Mm.
right? Gives a quick burst of energy so
Right.
that you can keep going, right? Now, typically after the run, you're worn out. I mean, you're tired, right? And you have family duties to attend to. You have to go out with your family. You have to, you can't go and get back to your bed and sleep for the next 3 hours,
Right.
right? So that is where you need to get back, and you need recovery, right? So there's historic. I mean, there is a lot of literature around what helps you recover, right? So you need to keep continuing to have water, electrolytes. You need to have carbs because the carbs would have depleted. So you need to have carbs. You need to have amino acids, which is where proteins come into play, right? So these are all very logical, normal things. And also there is a there is a time frame between which you should have your protein intake, right? You cannot say that I finish my runs, I will have my proteins in the night or amino acids in the night. So amino acids are a great substance which is available across even real food, but fundamentally is available, say, in a BCAA or in proteins as a building block, which helps the muscles recover, right? And when you have good recovery, the entire day goes well, and the next day you can come back to start doing whatever you want. So this is the basic philosophy behind pre-workout, during workout, and post-workout. And a lot of companies obviously try to see what better you can do in each of the categories,
Space.
right? So that's what people are trying to do.
So that brings me to the next question. Two important elements that we're constantly working with, right? Sugar and coffee, or sugar and caffeine, right? How do we manage those? What are they bad for you? Are they good for you? Are they bad at certain dosages? Are they good in certain dosages? What's your view on sugar and coffee, and how should we manage them?
Okay. So as a personal practitioner, I think I have more knowledge on coffee, how coffee works.
Right.
So coffee is something which a lot of people probably abstain from. Some people love it. Some people uh, have a lot of coffee during the day. But when it is applied to sports, right, or applied to active lifestyle, uh, coffee, I mean, as from a literature perspective, everyone knows it brings alertness into the body, it brings focus into the body. So, for a lot of years, athletes have been using coffee as a focus or alertness stimulant to help the body perform. Okay. And there are a lot of science. I mean, in fact, in the last 2 3 days, I was randomly looking at stuff, and there are studies to prove that, in fact, coffee also helps boost endurance to a certain point, beyond which there is not much of effect, right? Uh, and also the another study also, when I was reading, also says that coffee typically people attribute it to dehydration. The more coffee, but I think there are also studies which say that coffee to a certain extent doesn't really matter when it comes to hydration. Okay, but all in all, I think the good takeaway from coffee, I mean, caffeine, right, is that typically I think caffeine is not a bad thing according to me. I mean, it's a personal, I mean, opinion from a lot of literature which is there generally. It helps you boost your activity because of the alertness and focus that it brings. So when it comes to me as a person, I have my coffee always, every day, and more importantly, whenever I have a good race or training ahead of time, and so do a lot of athletes. Okay, and also in internally, I mean, during the workout itself, there are now concepts of having caffeinated drinks, caffeinated gels, for example. Uh, Even doing an Ironman, during the last leg, people love to have Coca-Cola, for example, because it really stimulates that extra bit through to the caffeine. So I think there are enough studies to prove that caffeine is good. But I think at the end of the day, if somebody is not averse to caffeine or not having caffeine, well and good. So try not to overdo things, right? When it comes to sugar, uh, so I think I mean, as you grow up, everyone loves sugar, right? The sweetness and it brings about. But I think the last 10 years there is a realization that sugar is not a great thing to be injected into the body, right? So I think there's a conscious effort to cut it down. Now there are two extremes. One is you take it out entirely out of your system. So a lot of people I know have really gone off sugar,
Right.
which is okay, right? Because uh, during the day your body gets a lot of carbohydrates,
Right.
right? So eventually you get those carbohydrates. So if your body is conditioned to it, well and good, right? But some people have it in moderate proportion, um, because at the end of the day, sometimes when you need that little bit of sugar to keep that energy a little bit up, right? But I think if you have conquered living your life without sugar, so I think again, if it's possible, try to cut down, have a balance. So I am in that space where I balance things out. I'm not, I'm in no way in any kind of debate I would never have extremes.
Right.
So that's been my view, both in coffee as caffeine as well as sugar.
And as we kind of come to a close, uh, a more broad question, a more generic question, and or rather, not a generic question, more specific question, but broader question. How has Fast and Up responded to the pandemic? What's been your experience in this last 6 months, and how do you see this affecting the overall fitness, sports, health, and well-being space? What's your view? Where do you see it going in the next year to 2 years?
Hmm. So March beginning, I think we were all in Mumbai planning for the next year, and the budgets were all frozen. We go back and we find that none of the plans that we made hold good for the year. So everything had to be thrown out, and that's the same for every company, I would believe, right? And then I think April first half, panic starts. We don't know which way things are going to go. I think plenty of companies, including Fast and Up, uh, went back and observed how things are progressing without doing too many things. Just
Right.
got back and assessed the situation, right?
Right.
Uh, Luckily for us, as I told you before as well, nutrition was something which was beginning to evolve at that point of time. So for us, we thought that area was obviously a good area to be in, and also to make sure that we continue to service that customer base. So what we did during that time was, obviously we kept motivating people, and fortunately everyone responded to the call, and we started making sure that the fastener distribution uh, picks up in a very, very fast manner. That was the only way we could reach out to more people. So we kind of expanded to more retail outlets. Online, we were much more there, and then put the news out in a much better way. So that's what happened in that side of the things. But one of the things that FastNup was associated with, is associated and will be, is on the sports and sports side, right? So that obviously has taken a beating. So right from the TCS 10K, which was supposed to happen in May, I don't think any of the running events have happened. The IPL got postponed. The domestic cricket season didn't take off. So in a way, it's been a whitewash of almost 9 months. So that chunk of our activity uh, in the traditional way didn't take place. But what it has meant is, everyone, including us, had to think about innovative ways of how to keep ourselves engaged with that community, right? And that's gotten us to, a lot of things on the virtual side. Um, we ran a lot of programs with coaches, physios, even the running community, in fact. Uh, we did a lot of things, got very, very active and very consistently active, which helped us see business in a very different way. So that process is continuing. I think where a lot of companies, including us, we should be aware of, but we unfortunately didn't fall into that is a fatigue element, right? Uh, a lot of companies wanted to do this, got into a lot of new things, but it's very important to sustain that through a longer period of time. And what's happening now is like a test match.
Are you able to extend this even beyond, when the pandemic effect wears off, or are you just doing it for the pandemic?
Correct. Because, initially the no news was that by September things will be back to normal, but it looks like it's going to keep extending in a different form.
Right.
So one has to be ready to play that test match.
Right.
And even within that quarter, you need to play a T20, right? Now, how do we look the future? The future definitely from a wholesome nutrition perspective, we find it quite exciting because for a company like Fast&Up, it would have made we would have had to spend a lot of money to educate the people to become more knowledgeable about nutrition. Fortunately, COVID in some form did it. A lot of companies are getting into nutrition, which is a good thing. But I think a lot of things would be digital. And so even in a post-COVID world there'll be a lot of thrust on digital habits where we are reinforcing ourselves to grow through that path. When it comes to fitness and running, etc., I think everyone loves to have physical activities, races, etc., even going out to the gym. But I think what will happen is there will be probably a hybrid mechanism which will come into play, and possibly have best of both the worlds. And I think very important for us as companies to be prepared for that, not lose sight of what the consumer wants during this transition, and come out of it in a much better way.
What do you think should be the message or takeaway that you would like to leave us with?
Well, I think first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And I think it's been a tough time for everyone in many ways. I think there are a lot of people who have motivation as an issue, taking initiatives as an issue. So, I mean, it transgresses many things right now. I think it's very important that everyone feels positive during this time, and hopes that things will get better. Um I think I tell this to a lot of people. It's very important that we stay connected during this time and not get into a shell at this point of time, and keep yourselves engaged. And what better way to keep yourself engaged than fitness or any kind of activity? In fact, for me, I have actually started to run almost every day in the morning, 6 out of 7 days, and I find it a very, very nice, focused activity which keeps me onto something else amongst the life that we are leading now, right? So do stay healthy, do stay safe, and I'm sure we will all come back and start running those marathons again.
Absolutely. Looking forward to those days. And, you've been doing a lot of work in that space. And, thank you for all the support that you give to all the events across the country. I know that you're one of the big, partners for many of the races. And it's because of the kind of involvement that you guys bring that I think it's all part of the movement. And I think you are a very important part of the movement. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Vijay. Bye.